Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, August 11th, 2025. Alastair Crooke will be here with us in just a moment. But first, this. We all know how devastating war is. Lives lost, communities destroyed. But war can also threaten your financial freedom. That's where America's heading. Our growing involvement in global conflicts. It means more spending, more debt, and a weaker dollar. That's a direct hit to your wallet. So here are three things to keep your eyes on: exploding debt, declining dollar, rising prices of gold and silver. These things are already happening. Goldman Sachs predicts gold could hit $4,500 an ounce by 2026. Why? Because central banks and smart investors are buying gold hand over fist. They know what's coming and they're hedging against it. Currency collapse, inflation, and market volatility. Gold has been a trusted store of value for thousands of years, and today we need that protection more than ever. Call Lear Capital now at 800-511-4620 or visit LearJudgeNap.com. No one is going to protect your wealth for you. You need to do it yourself, and now is the time. Alastair Crooke, welcome here. Alastair, you wrote a great piece a few days ago about Russia seeking to comprehend fully the various constraints on President Trump, just as relevant today after the announcement of their meeting in Alaska at the end of this week as it was before we knew when and where and even if they were going to meet. But I need to ask you this at the outset. Who has more to gain and who has more to lose by this meeting between President Trump and President Putin in Alaska on Friday?
Well, that depends entirely on what happens. But I think in the sense of who has much to lose is that I think that in terms of Ukraine, it's very unlikely that we will see much progress. I think what we will end up with the continuation of the war as Russia presses on with its military operation. With Trump, it's quite clear what he really wants is a headline, a good headline. He wants to be the center of attention again. He wants to dominate and to show that he's dominating the world scene, that he's, the great leader and that everyone comes. And so I think Witkoff was sent off to try and sort of fix that so that there could be, a great splashy meeting with Putin, and it would be, him and Putin together, and as others have suggested, even sort of bringing in Zelensky at the end. But the reality is straightforward. The reality is nothing has changed. There's no change in the Russian position. There's no sense in which the Russians have given any hint of a concession to offer Trump, except the ones we all know. And what happened, I think, was it may be much more complicated because it seems, and we don't know the details because nothing was reported about that conversation, but that Witkoff may have misled certainly the Europeans and Trump because he misunderstood what was being said. That at one point, Putin said, well, if we take a ceasefire could happen if we take the Donbas, that is Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast. And as for Zaporizhia and Kherson, well, we can have a sectorial ceasefire in that we will stay there in those two areas, but we will stop attacking the Ukrainian forces for the period of a ceasefire. It seems that Witkoff may have understood that Russia was proposing a withdrawal. And that's why we have all this talk about swaps taking place and swapping land and so on. It wasn't proposed that at all. This was just, as he said, a sectoral ceasefire in those two provinces. Donetsk, the Ukrainians have to, for Donbas, they just have to withdraw from it. But he was not proposing a Russian withdrawal.
Right.
person. And so I think that's caused, and what's happened is the Europeans have gone nuts. I think they're meeting about now on Zoom with Kallas, the European leader, and all coming, how to stop this and how to get, if you like, how to get Zelensky into this discussion and Europe. I think they've given up on trying to get Europe into it, but they want Zelensky in it. And of course, the Russians have said, no way. In fact, I think the Russians have suggested if you do that, who knows, we could have Medvedev or someone in it. But the point is, this has never been set up properly because it's remained as the archetype of General Kellogg, which is that until there's more pressure, until there's more pain felt by Putin, there won't be agreement. And clearly, since he hasn't moved on, we need more. So he's advocating to the Europeans, and the Europeans are taking it up. We need more sanctions, tariffs on Russia and on Russia's friends, secondary tariffs on Russia's allies. And the American ambassador to NATO has said, yes, more secondary sanctions. They're coming. It's war on bricks, essentially. So with all these pressures, what is Trump going to get out of this? And I would suggest that Putin chose very carefully to have this meeting in Alaska. And I think that Witkoff met for some hours before meeting with Trump with Kirill Dmitriev, the head of this Russian sovereign fund. He's a man who's Wall Street trained. I mean, he's a product of an American bank, and he's very bright, and he negotiates with Witkoff. I'm sure that what could come out of it, because as I say, they understand Trump needs a headline. He needs something good news, a showstopper, something that will excite everyone. So what about the Arctic? Here we are, in Alaska. What about the Arctic? Look, huge raw earth, huge deposits of minerals, oil, gas. Join with us in a joint project in the Arctic, and you'll make billions and billions from it. And so I don't know, I don't have evidence from this, but that choice, and it does go back, there were talks between American oil companies, this was pre-Biden, between American oil companies and Russia for joint production. I mean, it's a very rich area, and there is a lot of resources there. And would that tempt Trump to say, I've got a great deal out of this. We're going to make millions, billions of dollars from this deal. Let's forget, Ukraine we'll talk about later at another time.
Yeah.
So maybe.
I think you're right on the mark in thinking the way you believe Trump thinks. But from your experience as an ambassador and as a diplomat, when heads of state meet over something as dramatic as war, isn't there usually an agreement hammered out ahead of time, and the meeting is just the formality for them to take credit for the agreement that their underlings actually worked out? If that is the case, this is an abnormal meeting. As far as we know, nothing has been agreed to other than the time, date, and place of the meeting.
I think this really goes back, and the blame for the fact that this meeting is held without any preparation by Sherpas or others to get this in order. And you're absolutely right. I mean, usually it's the heads of state. They don't come to negotiate with another. They come to sign the agreement that has emerged. And this won't be the case. And I think, where it's all gone wrong is with General Kellogg, because he has just insisted No, there must be a ceasefire first, a straightforward ceasefire. Political discussions, no, you don't need to prepare them. We don't need to do anything. They will take care of themselves based on the sort of Korean model. And so nothing has happened. And the line is simply, well, now we need, if you like, tariffs on all those dealing with Russia, more tariffs. And I think to get out of this is one of the reasons Trump wanted so much to have this meeting, because it's quite clear to me, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me McConnell and others in the Senate are trying to regain control of the Republican Party away from Trump. And one of their tools for doing this is for tariffs and sanctions, because they know perfectly well that if they put tariffs and if they make Trump agree to a system of tariffs, whether it's on India or China or other BRICS countries, it will prevent ever a chance of normalizing relations with these countries, because we know America never lifts sanctions. I mean, they stay forever. It's impossible. There's never been a case of sanctions being imposed and then really lifting. So I think he's desperate to get out of being penned in by some of the hardliners in the Republican Party who can't stand the MAGA forces there at all, and want to get back to a sort of uniparty approach, which sees Russia as something that must be reduced to dependency on America, that it has to be subjected to enough pressure that it becomes a dependent country like other countries. And hence all of the firing up. And this is what Putin will be seeing all around. The pressure on Azerbaijan, that new proposal to put NATO forces right on Iran's border. All of what is happening, the heating up of the ISIS movements, the attack on Lebanon, the attack across the region, shows that Trump has no agency on the Middle East. He has showed that for whatever reason he is trapped, cannot take action there. Perhaps he doesn't know the motive for the trapment, but he understands that he's entrapped, or he doesn't know quite what the details are. And that is connecting into the American aspect of that as well.
As we speak, you mentioned this earlier, European heads of state and foreign ministers are meeting in a Zoom meeting. Also, as we speak, General Kellogg is in Kyiv. Now, what is he telling? What can he possibly be telling President Zelensky? For all we know, General Kellogg's on the Zoom meeting as well. But we know he's in Kyiv or on his way to Kyiv. What could he promise President Zelensky?
Well, I don't know what he's going to say in Kiev. Obviously, I can't read his mind. But what I hear is, and what we've been told reportedly, that Macron and Starmer agreed in a conversation between the two of them that what Zelensky must do is to do some provocative operation, a false flag operation or a provocative attack into Russia, into the depth of Russia, or something else, we don't know, sufficient to create an absolute pressure on Putin to respond, and thus to destroy the meeting altogether, to stop the meeting taking place. The Europeans are terrified of the meeting taking place, and they want to stop it. And this was a discussion, I believe, Russians have probably picked up on it, and suggesting that isn't it going to be an attempt to create some incident, some security catastrophe that creates the impossibility of following up on this meeting. And they're trying to put Zelensky into Alaska, whether invited or uninvited, to sit there on the borders and to sort of toss verbal hand grenades into it.
Don't you think that if Zelensky shows up to Alaska, even if he's invited by the Americans, the Russian delegation will go home?
Yeah, they won't talk to him. They'll say this was not in the agreement. I don't think Trump will do that. I don't think he'll do that. I think he understands that they won't do this with Zelensky. But this is part of the disruption tactics the Europeans are using.
How close is Russia to achieving its military objectives in Ukraine?
I think very close to an inflection point, which is that, after the Maidan revolution, there was set up in a very sort of urbanized area, this series of about 5 cities, which were turned into fortresses, into a new defensive, a new Maginot Line, if you like, of defense. And it's breaking up, and it's cracking, and it is being destroyed. And when it is broken, that is a major change psychologically, socially in Ukraine, but of course militarily, because there's nothing then. Russia will be on the Dnieper River. So there's a great deal of anxiety, and I think this is causing the European furor, is they sense that they could be at the point of defeat, that they do finally see that the situation is becoming past critical mass. It is getting critical mass, and it could change dramatically any moment. And this is what's causing this huge, they've been in discussions ever since it was announced. All the time they are talking about how to stop Trump, how to contain this, how to ensure that European interests, so-called, will be guaranteed in this process. European interests, of course, means continuing the war.
Right.
That's all.
Well, the Republicans in the Senate have 2 proposals making their way through the legislative process, one for about $50 billion, one for about $100 billion more aid to Ukraine. Now, the way these proposals are structured, it's subject to the discretion of the president. So even if he signed this into law, he doesn't have to spend it. But Colonel McGregor, Colonel Wilkerson, Scott Ritter have all told us that the United States military supplies of offensive and defensive weaponry are dangerously, dangerously low. And at some point, we will have to stop providing the Israelis, about which more in a minute, and the Ukrainians with the level of military supplies with which we've been supplying them. I don't know if these senators understand that.
I don't either, but I do think what you've just said is absolutely correct. There's no inventory, and Europe doesn't have the inventory either. So the question is, can money alone sustain Ukraine? How do you have an army, and how do you fight, if you like, if you haven't got weapons? The money is actually damaging. I found that in Afghanistan all those years ago when I was there. I used to persuade the CIA, try to persuade them, and I said, if you put too much money into Afghanistan, all you create is divisions, and people are jostling each other, wanting a bigger share, and no one actually fights because they're more concerned with grabbing their share of the loot that's coming in. You have to contain the amount of money you give to the weaponry and the ability you have to take this forward. And they're not doing that. So it's only money that's left, whether it's European money, American money, just money going in, and that money that ends up back in American banks and European banks. It doesn't actually change the situation on the ground. And they are on the cusp of a big defeat, which will be a blow to Europe, because it will destroy, the whole European conceit that they are somehow a politically significant power. And the whole idea that Europe is something to be contended with, that it is a power, and it has to reduce itself to nothing more than a trade association and a regulatory body. And this is causing great despair in Europe.
Is MAGA turning against Israel?
Yes, I believe not only MAGA. I think it is. There is a. I mean, I'm an outsider. You're an insider. But what I see from the outside is that there has been one of those big shifts that is social and cultural in America. The American, particularly young people, I think over 50s are still stuck in, Exodus film and are not moved on from that. But under 50, there's a big change. They cannot stomach the idea of seeing children starve to death. It just is just not acceptable. It is vile. And so there is a shift that is taking place, and they blame Israel, but they also blame Trump, and Trump knows that, and it's he who told an Israeli donor that my base is coming to hate you. But he can't do anything because Israel or the powers that be somewhere beyond have told him, no, you can't have what you want, which is an end to the war and to have a release of the hostages, because we are going to continue the war and we're going to continue it everywhere, and you can't stop it. And the question, comes back, who are these people? Because we've seen, and as you know, Aisling follows us closely. I mean, we see that there are divisions within Shin Bet, the security service, divisions within Mossad as well.
Yes.
So we used to call those two services, together with other parts of the institutional framework, the Israeli deep state. Well, that no longer works any longer, because behind that deep state, there has to be another deep state that is telling Trump, no, you're not going to get what you want. Witkoff can come and go, but no, we'll let a little bit more food in to sort of just keep the thing going, ticking over, but we are going to go ahead with our plans. And what's more, Witkoff was fooled. This is what the Israelis say, because he was told, or given the impression that, Israel was going to go in, sort out Hamas, and come out. They didn't say that the Israeli plans actually for at least 4 years in Gaza, maybe much, much longer. And that at the same time, Israel is pursuing ardently, where can we send these Palestinians to? They came up with a deserted Indonesian island the other day. I don't think that's serious, but, this is typical of what is going on. So, I mean, there is a right-wing force in Israel that seems to be having a great deal of say and power, even over parts of Shin Bet and the defense. We had more than 500 senior defense security officers in Israel writing a letter saying, we are committing harikari. This is a great mistake. We are going to suffer a defeat in Gaza. A defeat, not just in Gaza, but a defeat of the Israeli project, of the Zionist project as a whole, is going to flow from this. That's 500, including heads of Shin Bet, says Amy Ayalon, and Pardo, the former head of Mossad, all signing on to this letter. Yet someone in America, some people in America or in Israel on the right have said to Trump, no, we are going ahead with Gaza and we will not agree to do a deal and to get the hostages released. You can imagine the tension in Israel because it's a condemnation to death of the hostages.
Today, Monday, the IDF murdered 5 Al Jazeera journalists, one of whom was exceptionally popular and extremely well-known. They,
exactly.
of course, claimed that these were not journalists. They were Hamas under the guise of being journalists, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence for that whatsoever. It just seems that every month, every week, every day, this is worse and worse and worse. There's more slaughter, there's more bloodshed, there's more innocence.
I mean, you need to, I mean, be aware of Lebanon is on the edge of civil war because, this envoy Barak is pushing very hard. And the Saudis are pushing extremely hard for the forced disarmament of Hezbollah. And Hezbollah are not weakened rump, as people think. They have cleaned up everything. They don't use telephones. They don't use the communications. All of that, any Western electronic component has been washed out of the system. And they still have their heavy weapons. They haven't been done. But if they think in Washington that the Lebanese army is going to be able to disarm Hezbollah, they're wrong. It will lead to a disaster, and it will probably divide the Lebanese army in two.
Alastair Crooke, thank you very much, my dear friend. A truly, truly gifted analysis. And we'll see what happens. We may have to call on you again if some announcement comes out of Alaska. But thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Anytime, Judge. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Coming up later today at 10 o'clock this morning, Ray McGovern. At 11:30 this morning, Larry Johnson. At 1 o'clock this afternoon, live from a television studio in Moscow, Scott Ritter and some Russian officials, and I will get to question them, and they will get to question each other. And then at 1:45, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Justin Napolitano for Judging Freedom.